Hello and welcome everyone to our Vistatec Life Sciences in Focus podcast. Fascinating conversations with global life sciences experts. This is a space where we interview life sciences experts once a month, and I am your host today, Karen Tkaczyk. I am so delighted to talk with our guest this month, Michael W. Young, who is one of those people who appears to live with mission and not just to pay that concept lip service. He currently leads biomedwoRx, where he is a consultant strategist. Michael's had a fascinating career, and I am very grateful to have you here today. Please, would you tell our listeners a little bit about your origin story and how you got to where you are now at biomedwoRx?
Well, first of all, Karen, thank you so much to you and to Vistatec for inviting me on to this really well-watched podcast series. I appreciate that, and I look forward to sharing a few minutes with you and some ideas as well. So you asked me earlier, kind of what is my why, and I thought I'd share with you that for those folks who don't know me, I am a first-generation Asian American. Was born and raised here from parents who came from Shanghai, and my mother and my father from Java in Indonesia. At the time that they came to the U.S., immigrants were all about assimilation into the American culture. And certainly, as is the focus of Vistatec around language and translation, I can share with you that the language and tone that you hear from me today is very much so a part of that assimilation. In our house, we did not necessarily speak English all the time, but the reality was that was an expectation that we would assimilate into the culture. And so what you hear from me is actually language and intonation and cadence, which came from my great teacher, which was radio and television. So I listened a great deal to the way Americans talked, and growing up in the Midwest in Ohio, I have that flat Midwestern radio voice, if you will. So, I think overall, my mother was a practicing OB-GYN, and my father a structural mechanical engineer. So there was a bent clearly in my upbringing to take me into the professional world, if you will. I hope I haven't failed them miserably, but I had an opportunity in undergrad. I did my undergrad work at Kenyon College in Ohio. And at that time, it was kind of a nascent amalgamation of 2 degrees that I earned there, one in English and one in physiology biochemistry. And so I think at the early stages of collegiate life, I had this desire to communicate science. And ultimately, this turned into this desire to improve patients' quality of life, and now working specifically to improve clinical outcomes. And I've been very fortunate to serve on the board of directors of a couple different patient advocacy organizations. And getting close to the patients helps me to understand so much more about what we need to deliver in terms of the clinical development that we do, the drugs that we develop, the technologies that we develop to help make sure that the quality of life that they experience is something better than the disease dictates. And hopefully that helps you understand a little bit about where I come from. So thanks for noting that it's mission driven, if you will.
Yes, well, you have made my point, sir, haven't you, with that introduction about yourself. Thank you for sharing that about your background and your multicultural upbringing and how you came to where you are. Yes. So let's keep going in that multicultural theme. You have a great deal of experience with global launches, don't you? By definition, we also help companies with that to achieve that overarching challenge of balancing regulatory compliance with cultural sensitivity. So I bet you've had some meaty examples in your time. Let's talk about that.
Okay, happy to do that. I always say that if you live long enough, you get to see an awful lot of things, and so I've been very fortunate in essentially a 30-year career so far in this industry. Um, I've had the opportunity to direct or be a part of the launch of 22 new chemical entities, NCEs, in the US, Europe, and in Asia. My therapeutic concentration has been in oncology, hematology, but in the past 9 years that I've been had created biomedwoRx and this consultancy. We've built a lot of excellent experience in immunology, dermatology, cardiovascular, stroke, and dementia and CNS. So in fact, lately we've been supporting some global applications for some really outstanding clinical software and AI platforms, and who isn't working on AI these days? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, global launches, some very significant billion-dollar drugs are in that portfolio and in that skill set. And the consultancy that we run is really all about applying that experience and an understanding of customer markets and patient needs to make sure that our clients have really successful launches.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you help with the whole product life cycle then, not just that launch phase. Tell me a little more.
Yeah, that's true. So, typically, our clients tend to be smaller, mid-sized companies who don't have necessarily the infrastructures of some of the big pharma companies. So they are looking for external expertise, and that comes often at a preclinical stage. I mean, we have certainly helped our fair share of six guys in a garage and tried to help make sure that both strategic placement as well as messaging is on board, and making sure that the way that they are approaching a coming launch is helpful. Likewise, we've been offered opportunities to help companies who are in late stage life cycle, really looking at where are things going to come when patent expires. And so when you have loss of exclusivity, there's a whole host of other commercial considerations to take into place, well beyond just pricing and kind of market share, but really looking at what's ultimately going to happen to that brand. So in many ways, what we're really all about is working at that intersection between clinical strategy and commercialization, and the continuum that exists there in terms of caring for the brand, making sure that we are optimizing the opportunities for the research to do the most good for the patients that they serve.
Right. So therein lies the importance of communication and
Mhm.
language in that piece of the puzzle that you're providing for your clients. What have you seen in terms of cultural misses in incompetency? We talk about cultural competency, right? Have you seen cultural incompetency? Do you have any examples of perhaps any therapeutic domains where that's particularly important, or any particular clinical research studies, for instance, where that cultural competency or the language or the register was just something was failing and you helped to unblock things?
Sure. Yeah, I have multiple examples. I don't know that they're always a result of incompetency, but often they're a result of the paradigm under which the management team is operating. In many cases, you've got companies that are candidly pretty homogeneous. in the way you look at them. You have the classic view of the pharmaceutical company based on the East Coast of the U.S. and it's a bunch of Caucasian um, graduates of major business schools, et cetera, sitting around deciding what it is that's going to happen for a particular disease state that happens to occur in a particular patient sector. They may not know much about that, or they may be blind to some of the things that are needed there. And so while I would say that and we all get focused on this, the importance and the opportunity that there is with new technology and new targeted therapies to resolve clinical problems is the science part of it. The communication piece of this is equally important because if patients and prescribers cannot understand nor communicate why you're going to take the medication on this regimen and on these days and for this length of time and in this manner, the therapy ultimately fails. There are a lot of good examples just in direct to consumer alone. I can share with people that Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC, for instance, has this fantastic slogan that it's finger licking good chicken, right? But when you translate that into Mandarin or in Chinese, it literally comes out as eat your fingers off. So, you have to think a little bit about that. Pepsi for many years campaigned on this thing called Come Alive with the Pepsi Generation. I may be dating myself a little bit with that, but when you translate that into, formal Chinese, it actually comes out as Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the grave. That's pretty concerning if you think about it. I'll give you one from the auto industry. I am a student of brands and branding, and I will tell you that a company as big as General Motors with their Chevrolet brand, in the 60s and 70s, they launched a brand globally for a car that they called the Nova, and that was very space age and thinking about that. But unfortunately, Nova translate to won't go if you look at any of the Spanish speaking countries. So really not a good choice in terms of names.
Yeah.
When it comes to drugs, there are important things to understand in the way in which labeling is created and the way in which advertising and promotion and educational messages are delivered. I'll give you one simple example. Understanding in the Cuban dialect, when a patient presents and they say they're intoxicado. Intoxicado has a localization aspect to it because in Cuban dialect, it means food poisoning. Most anybody who looks at the word intoxicado would say, oh, this individual is intoxicated. They're drunk. And that's not necessarily the case. So just some examples of ways in which you've got to be culturally sensitive. If I can, I'd talk a little bit about the implications for clinical trials, because that is often where the language actually and the practice of prescribing becomes better understood by the prescribers or the clinicians who are going to use the drug. We need to be aware of a concept that I've forwarded over the last couple years here, which is the concept of JEDI. We think of Star Wars, the Jedi warriors, but this is a war or a battle around JEDI: justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Why are these things important? They're not just woke kinds of thinking here. It has to do with the genetic understanding of what's causing these diseases and how we need to study them. So the justice component is about making sure that patients who contribute their data are acknowledged and that data is treated with the correct kind of formality and justice, if you will. Some would say that patients should be paid for that data. The equity piece of it is very clear. That's a message that has been very loud. But we often talk about diversity and inclusion as if these are things where we're just seeking representation of different races, lifestyles, etc. But the reality is it provides real importance to the populations who are studied, and the data that is revealed by that can help us significantly in dealing with the potential side effects that occur in those populations. As an example, I would give you that, while the speed and the delivery of the COVID vaccines was incredibly impressive and stunningly important to large populations, the problem was the vast majority of the patients studied in that had no diversity or inclusion. They were all, largely middle-class white Americans who were seeking to volunteer, if you will. So again, cultural specificity and the norms as it applies to clinical trials is an important part of the consideration in constructing your trials and in carrying them out. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It does completely. And I like on the diversity is good science, right?
Absolutely.
Right. I'm so with you on that front. I don't think that, I think that the pharmaceutical companies and the medical device manufacturers believe that too. So I think that our clinical research will be more and more diverse over time, no matter what's going on from an administrative standpoint in any part of the world, no matter whether there are mandates for diversity, this, and that or not. I think that most of us who have an understanding of the science of a particular disease area, it becomes a no-brainer. Of course, you need diverse populations to represent what's going on in the real world. So I feel quite optimistic about that aspect of things personally.
Yeah, this clinical development community that both of us live in is an amazing community, and it's a community that certainly pays attention, regardless of what the legislative agenda might be, pays attention to the fact that we do want good science here. And I'm simply underscoring the fact that when we do that science, we need to make sure that we're addressing the needs of that patient-centric concern. And that is to not only get the therapy to be optimized, but to make sure that patients and providers understand how to optimize that therapy as well. And so language is a very, very real part of that.
So let's dive into that a bit more. Compliance, adherence to treatments by both patients and caregivers, perhaps.
Sure.
There are areas where that's much more difficult than others, right? There are therapeutic areas where that can be a big problem.
Yeah, I think that that's true. I mean, we often pay attention to the large primary care types of things that we deal with, the flu, coughs, colds, big indications such as arthritis and diabetes, et cetera. But the fact of the matter is that there are, I do a lot, our team does an awful lot of work in the area of orphan or rare diseases. And when you collectively look at rare diseases, it's literally millions of patients. There are over 1,000 different orphan diseases, and each one of these has its own, if you will, idiosyncrasies and vocabulary. And it's important to understand, especially I think in oncology and dementia treatment. We recognize that getting patients to actually comply and then adhere to their regimens to make sure that those family and friends, supportive groups that can help with, optimizing therapy are using the right language and asking the right kinds of questions. So it's important for drug innovators, manufacturers, all along what I call the prescription pathway, that everybody is using effective and tested kinds of verbiage to make these things happen. That goes to also with the graphics and the lifestyle impact things that you might include in your advertising and promotion and education. We, it's easy for us to just go and get some clip art or some, purchased images, but many times they're just not appropriate for the products and the disease that we're talking about. So, and that's particularly true, when the route of administration is novel. We now have so many more drugs being given intranasally. We have pediatric applications. We've got geriatric applications. People need to be thinking about what are the needs and the language that goes with those. And then lastly, clearly we are now well into this age of applying AI and how ChatGPT is helping with all of these things. OpenAI, pick your platform du jour here. Lately, I've been doing a lot of work with Claude, and you can see how training bots, or as we move to more agentic AI, where this is all going to be created largely from data experience that's already happened. We have to recognize that if you've got patients interacting with a bot on your website, that bot's got to be speaking the right language also, and there's got to be understanding of who they're talking to. So cultural sensitivity is important there. We already know in clinical trials when patients are coming in to enroll in a trial, and they are not seeing anybody that looks like them and no one that talks like them when they go into these clinical sites, it's hard enough to get the kind of compliance and the kind of, if you will, active engagement that people are looking for. So we have lots of room for improvement here. And I think AI is one of those areas where, we need to be watchful for how that language is being created.
Right. Yes, I think you give a good example. People ask me all the time, how is AI affecting your world, Karen? And of course, there are workflows. Well, here's the way I would put it in the context of clinical research to narrow things down. A company is conducting a clinical trial. The informed consent form is translated by qualified linguists who understand the language that's needed for first for regulations, but also to truly inform the patient correctly, right? So that the patient is truly informed before they consent. That needs all the humans with all the expertise. That same company's corporate website, we might be able to run that through a first draft of something using a tool, and then a human polishes it to give the branding, the voice, the tone. The chatbot, we can use AI, right? So you see the levels of risk there, different types of content, different types of different use cases. And we find that where there's risk to life and limb, all those parties still want humans in the loop, still know that they need humans in the loop, and that AI adds risk. And then when there's less risk, that's where we can bring it in. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what our kids are doing in 25 years, right? Where will we be then? Where will we be then, Michael?
And I doubt you're going to have to wait 25 years at the rate of acceleration
For sure.
that we're seeing right now.
Yes.
This is very much so a part of the way we're going to be living and doing business and developing new drugs in the very, very near future. It's definitely present. And when we have agentic AI, when we have essentially machines talking to machines, they can use their own, integrative language, but the way in which those outputs come to ultimately to patients to not only get them to use the drugs correctly, but we should be looking at opportunities to instill trust. We should be looking at opportunities to instill confidence, because we recognize that the way you feel about your medication has a lot to do with whether you're going to be successful with it. So I definitely encourage that holistic approach to looking at this. And the points that you're bringing up are incredibly valid.
Mm. Well, Michael, we should come to an end. But before we go, I always like to ask, is there anything else you'd like to share with your audience?
Sure. Um, I'd like to take this opportunity to kind of tee up something for people to think about. Um, it's not all about me or you for that matter, but the world is changing here, and as a company, biomedwoRx is very focused on strategy. But part of our skill set is to help our clients to see where they are going. And to quote the great Wayne Gretzky, he was once asked, how did you score 100 goals in a year? And his answer was, I always try to skate to where the puck is going to be. So that's what we try to do with our clients, is to try to help pose a question about what is going on in the environment and where are you going to go with some of this. So the question I pose to everybody is, I think everybody is well aware that there are current likely reforms that are going to be coming to direct-to-consumer advertising. Language is very much so an important part of direct-to-consumer, both in terms of the precautions that we need to give, but also the call to action as to why anybody would want to look at that drug, for instance. The pharmaceutical industry, broadly, the life science industry, spent over $30 billion in 2024 on essentially digital and direct-to-consumer types of advertising. About 9 billion of that went into direct media, television, streaming, internet-based digital approaches. So if there are going to be dramatic changes in that, some have suggested that, there will be a return to absolute clarity and transparency around all side effects and everything. That's going to end up making your advertising 4 minutes of, ISI, and so it's going to be overbearing. And I don't think the scoring on that's going to be that promising for pharmaceutical industry. So if you look at the industry and say, all right, let's just be conservative and say, what are you going to do with that $9 billion that you spent on this if you're not going to put it into DTC advertising? Where will all that money go? And we as an industry have a chance to redirect that spend to where it's actually going to do some good. And I would encourage folks to be thinking about what they do with medical education, what they are specifically doing with this very shrinking population of prescribers in comparison to the number of patients who need to be treated. And so it's an opportunity. Do we put that into medical conventions? Do we put that into more virtual types of meetings? Where are we going on that? And I would submit to you that one of the areas of refinement is clearly going to be around language and what we do, the effort that needs to be spent there. So I don't know. In closing, I'd simply say to you that I'm extremely active on LinkedIn. I try to post ideas and useful concepts on that. But I encourage anyone listening to this podcast to reach out and talk with me about where you're going. How do you want to get there? What might be getting in your way? We're happy to solve problems and give better solutions.
Love it. Thank you. And as a girl who grew up in a country where DTC didn't exist, wasn't allowed,
Right?
I have to say I don't feel too bad about changes personally. Don't think it's
Yeah,
added
there are.
much to.
Karen, you may be aware there are only two countries in the world that do allow direct-to-consumer, New Zealand and the U.S. And it's interesting to see what people actually get out of that. So
Yep.
I would agree with you.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for your insights. And I will second the fact that Michael posts very interesting content in LinkedIn. So please do connect with him there and reach out. And to our audience, thank you for listening. This Life Sciences in Focus podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the leading platforms, and also on YouTube if you would like to watch our conversation. Please make sure to tune in again next month for Vistatec Life Sciences in Focus, fascinating conversations with global life sciences experts.